Good evening, everyone. My name is Mark Dunick, and as a member of the Community Relations Committee of the Jewish Federation of Greater Metro West, we welcome you to this special very program. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge a few people in the room. Councilman Joe Lopez and Councilman Gary Ikabachi of Bloomfield, thank you very much for attending. I also want to acknowledge Rabbi Elliot Matthias. He's the chair of CRC, as well as Sherry Goldberg and Magda Shaler-Haynes, CRC leaders. Hello, thank you. The Community Relations Committee is the advocacy arm of the Jewish Federation. We work on policy concerns and engage with interfaith, interethnic, and the greater community at the local, state, and national levels. The issue of criminal justice reform is an issue that needs the involvement of everyone. The high rate of incarceration of young people in our country is at an alarming rate. But more importantly, are very troubling statistics on how the African American community and minority children are being severely impacted. This is an issue that we believe needs to be a concern of all segments of society, and we must all be a part of the solution together. In the Jewish community, we call this tikkun olam, making the world a better place. It's one of our core values. There's also a Jewish saying, Kol Yisrael arevim zel lazeh. All Jews are responsible for each other. But we, at Jewish Federation, we revised that saying slightly to all Americans are responsible for our American brothers and sisters. The issue of racial justice in our nation has been in the headlines often this year, taking the form of racial profiling, high incarceration rates, and increased polarization and stereotyping. We've seen an increase by the African American community in organizing and speaking out against these concerns. The Jewish community public policy organizations have moved this issue to the forefront. The Jewish Council of Public Affairs, the Anti-Defamation League, National Council of Jewish Women, and others have passed resolutions and have been actively supporting national legislations and educating and mobilizing the grassroots to become more involved at the local level. This should come as no surprise to anyone, because the Jewish and African American communities have partnered on multiple civil rights fronts, including educational reform, desegregation in housing, employment, public accommodations, and eroding of voting rights protections. Today's criminal justice reform efforts call on us to act once again. The value of tikkun olam is so important to me personally that I even brought my children David and Renee to join us tonight, to listen and to learn. Real change and education begins at home. We are privileged to have the Honorable Paul J. Fishman, U.S. Attorney for the District of New Jersey, as our featured speaker. We want to thank U.S. Attorney Fishman for A, championing this issue, and B, for introducing us to our incredible panelists who've been working on the front lines of this cause. We're also privileged to work with Jim Johnson, the former Undersecretary of the U.S. Treasury for Enforcement, on organizing this event. Jim will be framing and moderating this program. Jim is a partner at Debevoise in Plimpton and a former chair of the Brennan Center for Justice. He spent half of his career in law enforcement as a federal prosecutor and as a senior member of the Clinton administration. Jim led Governor Corzine's advisory committee on police standards and is a founding member of New Jersey Communities Forward. This is all about building relationships, trust, and working towards a better future for everyone. And on that note, Jim, mic is yours.
I think the mic is not on mine, but it's attached to me, so I'm going to speak from here. My first word really is one of thanks, tremendous thanks. The turnout in this room, the concern about an issue that may not be immediately apparent to people is one that concerns all of us, is tremendous. I think it's fair to say that from the perspective of the African American community, and I'm a member of many different communities, one of which is the African American community. The things that are worse, that actually compound the injury that you see, whether or not it's in the videos that have been made public, or in the higher rates of incarceration of young people, and the absence of men from the community as a result of that, is the sense that this happens it's invisible, and no one cares. And one of the most important things to happen from events like this, where the demographics are quite different from when we talk about, in many instances when we talk about these issues, is that just by your presence, just by your willingness to come, to understand, to listen, to learn, and perhaps join with us in action, you are sending a very important signal of bearing witness, of just the witness is important. Just paying enough time to show people that you actually care, that in fact it means something to you, and it's not just an intellectual exercise. For that, I'm very, very grateful. This, for me, and has been for, basically since I was 6 years old, a really, a very significant week, because this is now 38 years and 2 days after Martin Luther King was killed. And that is one of my first political memories, where I was, as a child, I was playing next to my mother's bed, and this was the 60s, so I had Lincoln Logs and Hot Wheels. And my father walked through the door, and he said, "They just killed Dr. King." And my mother is a very, very, very upbeat person. She is definitely upbeat. She doesn't want anyone ever to see her sweat or to see her cry. And I just remember the heaving sobs when that happened. And that has stuck with me. To me, it's hugely important in this week to be here, because there are two things that happened on that night in 1968, April 4th, 1968. The big awful was the death of Martin Luther King, and cities all over the country erupted. More than 120 cities erupted in flames. One city didn't, and it was expected to, and that was Indianapolis, Indiana. And in that city, Robert Kennedy really encapsulated the meaning to be drawn from the life of, part of the meaning to be drawn from the life of Martin Luther King, and what we as a democracy should be trying to do together without regard to party or color or race or creed. And I'm going to share a little bit of that, and then we're going to frame the discussion. And we'll hear first from Daquan Rosario, and then from the U.S. Attorney, a friend of mine for now decades. So what had happened on that night was that there were no cell phones, there was no instantaneous transmission. King had been killed at about 6. And the people gathered to hear Robert Kennedy had no idea. If you've ever heard this tape, you will hear Kennedy first say, "Do they know about Martin Luther King?" And someone tells him no. And so he addresses the crowd, and he delivers the news plainly without any really adornment, and you hear the screams. And then they listened. And he talked about, he reached from a point of empathy, he talked about the death, the murder of his own brother, and the option he had to be filled with rage or hate, or to move forward in a very different way. And by that stage, this was a year after Newark and other cities had erupted that previous summer, he was very much attuned to the fact that the nation could continue to be split between black and white. We could divide into warring camps, or we could attempt to move forward. And the words that he spoke that night were actually very apt to what we're trying to do here, because what we're trying to do here is to understand. And so after speaking about his brother, and after speaking about hatred, and the natural impulse to be bitter, and the natural desire to seek revenge, Kennedy said this. And it's particularly pointed not only at this particular week, but given what's happening across the world and in our country, where there are things that we thought we had solved 50 years ago were emerging right back up on the surface. He said to the crowd, "You can be filled with bitterness and with hatred and a desire for revenge. We can move in that direction as a country in greater polarization. Black people amongst blacks, and whites amongst whites, filled with hatred toward one another. Or we can make an effort, as Martin Luther King did, to understand and to comprehend and replace that violence, that stain of bloodshed that has spread across our land, with an effort to understand, compassion, and to love. And I think that's part of what we're trying to do here tonight. Now, it's not, these panelists have never been together in one place, and this will not be, I can predict one thing, that this will not be an evening without incident of some sort. Roll with it. But remember this, because Kennedy finished with the idea of this being sort of a dedication for our nation. Let's dedicate ourselves to what the Greeks wrote so many years ago, to tame the savageness of man and make gentle the life of this world. Let us dedicate ourselves to that. So our first speaker will be Daquan Rosario. And Daquan Rosario is a graduate of a reentry program sponsored by the U.S. Attorney's Office. But more than that, Daquan Rosario is a person who's lived a life, who's turned his life around, and can speak about the power of compassion, the power of second chances, and the power of our ability together, and you will even see this in this bond that he has with Paul, to move forward. So with that, I'll turn it over to Daquan, and then to the U.S. Attorney.
First and foremost, I want to thank you for having me tonight. It's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here. It's an honor and a pleasure.
It's for my height, that's why
You'll
they
have
got
to
you.
lean in. It's a highly decorated mic check now.
I want to say good evening, and it's an honor and a pleasure for me to be here to speak to you on behalf of the reentry program, all Fishman, and these other distinguished gentlemen and women. My name is Daquan Rosario. I'm a graduate of the first reentry program that was established by this guy and his team. He's also the guy who sentenced me to 10 years in prison. So it was a kind of, funny thing for him to help me and, spank me. But I was in the halfway house. I got released 2013. I went in 2003. I was in the halfway house with really no plans of how to adjust, how to move forward. I was kind of stuck, When I went in, there was no iPhones, there was a lot of, technology changed a lot. When I came out, things were just moving at a rapid pace. My parole officer, probation officer, came to the halfway house and he talked to me about a reentry program. And the reentry program was, you had to go in front of a judge twice a month, every 2 weeks, twice a month. And that was the last thing I wanted to do, was go in front of another judge for anything. So I turned him down. I told my PO, I said, you know what? I've had enough of judges, courtrooms, lawyers. I don't want to see y'all no more. So he told me, he said, just come down for one session. If you don't like it, you don't have to, join. So a cousin of mine was also in the program. He's in the halfway house with me. He comes back, he say, look, you might want to think about joining this program. These people ain't what you think they are. I said, what you mean, judges and lawyers? What else are they? He said, no, they're different. I said, what you mean different? He said, they trying to help you. I said, it's another trick. I said, they're trying to trick you. You're going to get in that program, you're going to mess up, and you're going back down the joint. He said, no, I don't think it's like that. So I went on a visit, and I was in there maybe 20 minutes, and I went to sign up. Because, first of all, the judge, Judge Arleon, I haven't met her yet. When you meet her, y'all might want to sign up, but y'all never. She just has this energy and this compassion about her that made me fall in love with the program. So I signed up, and I was unemployed at the time. So and I was in the halfway house. So you know they on your back. They look, what are you doing? I'm at the halfway house. What kind of job you want? What do you want to do with yourself? They ask you questions that you may not ask yourself. So, you know, you get people who they call slackers. You know, they come home and, you know, they don't have a direction. These people get on your back and they point you in directions. So, I got a job at Burger King. Burger King, you know, flipping burgers. It wasn't the ideal job, but it was a start. And the judge, Paul Fishman, and the team that he assembled, they never let you settle. They always say, okay, working at Burger King, you've been here 2-3 months, what else do you want to do? I'm like, I just started working here. I just, you know, got a couple checks under my belt, you know, let me chill. They're like, no, we want you to shoot higher. We want you to become more than what you think you can become. So with that motivation behind me, I told the judge that I had got a new job. It was a medical transportation job. You know, I was just basically transporting patients from dialysis to home, and I might take you to a hospital or to a doctor's appointment. So with that job, the judge and the rest of the team, what do you want to do now? I said, wow. I said, y'all moving at a rapid pace. But the job that I was at, they also provide EMT service. So my boss, he told me, he said, we need EMTs. So you would have to go to school, you know, pass your state test, and you know, you already got a job here. So I said, school? You know, I've been out of school almost 15, 20 years. I'm out the loop. So, like I said, some of these people have more confidence in me than I had in myself. So they say, you know, you seem like a pretty bright guy. I said, it's medical school. It's not like, you know, I'm not just picking up boxes. And, you know, it's medical school. I have to do math, I have to do science. So I let them know that I want to go back to school. They told me we'll pay half of the tuition, and my job paid the other half. So I went to school 3 nights a week, Tuesday nights, Thursday nights, and Sunday morning, 8 to 4. That's my whole Sunday. But it was worth it. So I went to school, and I passed the class. So when you pass the class, you have to take the New Jersey State test. I took the test. You have to have a 70 to pass. I got 71. I didn't tell nobody I got a 70. Y'all the only people who know I got a 71. Everybody know I passed. So with that, I'm a certified EMT of the state, and without the backing of them and just the constant push, I don't know where I would be. You know, they not only help as far as me finding employment, but they have days like, we have parties all the time. Christmas, Thanksgiving, and they give out tons of food. So I make sure I'm there every holiday. Every holiday, they give out ShopRite gift cards and everything. But the program works if you work it. I mean, they provide the resources, they provide all type of outlets, but it's up to the individual to take advantage of all the assets and all the resources that he has. So if you don't take advantage of it, it's worthless because you're not using it the way you should use it. But like I said, Paul Fishman, his assistant, it's kind of mind blowing, you know, that 10 years ago or 12 years ago, I'm at a podium with my lawyer, he's at the other table, and he's telling the judge, yeah, this guy needs to go away for a long time. You know, so in the back of my mind, I'm like, I see this Paul, you know, he only 5'2".
5'2".
But when I seen him, and the outpouring help that he was thrusting upon me, I couldn't help but hug him and tell him that, you know, I'm grateful for everything that he's done for me and my family and some of my friends who's also in the program. So, with that being said, if you have anybody that you know in the system, or it doesn't necessarily have to be a convict. It can be somebody who's just down on their luck. Just stick out a helping hand, and you never know where that person will end up. And like I said, with that being said, I want to thank Paul, this distinguished guy here, and I'll see y'all later.